In this passage from Osho's interpretation of the Astavakra Gita, he delves into the symbolic meaning of blindness, desire, and the nature of human conflict, with an emphasis on the inner vision versus outer perception. Here's a breakdown of Osho's interpretation of these concepts. 1. Blindness as a metaphor for inner perception. Osho begins by discussing Dhritarashtra, who, despite having physical eyes, is metaphorically blind. His physical eyes allow him to see the external world, but he lacks the deeper internal vision, the inner eye, that would enable him to perceive truth and spiritual reality. This inner blindness refers to the inability to understand the deeper aspects of life and existence. Osho's insight. Physical sight alone does not guarantee true understanding or awareness. True sight comes from within, through self-awareness and deeper insight, not merely from the sensory perceptions. 2. Desire and the nature of human conflict. Osho highlights the human tendency to remain trapped in desires, symbolized by the blind Dhritarashtra's constant yearning to understand what is happening on the battlefield. Even though he is incapable of truly seeing, his desire to know is persistent, reflecting the human condition where desires or yearnings are never truly satisfied by external means. Osho's insight. The inner conflicts and desires of the mind are endless. No matter how much one sees or gains in the physical world, the desire remains unquenched unless one transcends it internally. 3. The paradox of violence and peace. Osho reflects on the nature of war and violence, especially in the context of dharma, righteousness, and adharma, unrighteousness. He mentions that even when people are involved in war or violence, they believe their cause is just. This delusion arises because they lack true vision, the ability to perceive the deeper consequences of their actions. Osho's insight. True understanding and peace come only when one transcends the mind's dualistic tendencies, good versus bad, righteous versus unrighteous. Violence, war, and conflict emerge from these delusions. People who engage in conflict believe they are fighting for a righteous cause, but it is the inner blindness and ignorance that perpetuates this. 4. The illusion of external forces. Osho warns that when people are fighting under the guise of righteousness or dharma, they often lose sight of their own inner truth. He makes a compelling point that even wars fought with noble intentions are rooted in the same ego and desires that lead to violence. The external conflicts we see are merely reflections of the inner chaos that remains unresolved. Osho's insight. The true battleground is not external, but internal. The mind creates wars, conflicts, and struggles, and these are merely projections of the internal turmoil of desires, ignorance, and the lack of spiritual clarity. 5. Human nature and the search for truth. Osho also discusses the search for truth as an essential quality of the human condition, symbolized by the blind man's desire to know what is happening. This craving for truth, though, is often misguided because it is directed toward external sources rather than an inward quest for self-realization. Osho's insight. The human search for truth is constant, but it is frequently misplaced in the external world. True truth lies in transcending the ego and desires and looking within. The search for truth begins when one starts to observe the mind and its projections. 6. The dangers of fighting under the veil of righteousness. Osho makes a significant observation about the dangers of fighting or pursuing anything under the guise of righteousness. He points out that the moment war is justified as being for a good cause, it becomes even more dangerous because the justifications hide the true nature of the conflict: inner blindness, ignorance, and ego. Osho's insight. When people fight for what they believe is right, without understanding their inner motives, they perpetuate violence and suffering. True righteousness does not need justification. It emerges from inner clarity, compassion, and awareness. 7. The role of blindness in war and conflict. In the final part of the passage, Osho expands on the metaphor of blindness, asserting that all wars and conflicts are born from the blindness of human consciousness. When people are blind to their true nature, they engage in destructive actions without recognizing their ultimate consequences. Osho's insight: the root cause of all conflicts is the blindness of the mind. When humans fail to see their true selves and remain attached to their desires and ego, they continue to create conflict both internally and externally. The search for truth and peace can only be found by overcoming this blindness.